up guys, Tyler Yasuda here with Tytaniumfitness. If you're wondering why I'm so shiny, it's because I just got done training and I really needed to take a shower, but I thought I'd make this video first. I decided I was going to start making a series of videos to sort of review and talk about all the equipment that I use in the gym, everything from my lifting belt to straps. Also, I wanted to just, I had this idea that I know you guys have seen, or if you watch a lot of my videos, you've probably seen in the outro, I usually put one of my friends saying something like, don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe, and then they do something weird. But I had this idea that it would be kind of cool to have some of you guys being featured in the outro. So if you're interested, what I need you guys to do is film yourself, I don't know, hitting a PR, or I guess doing whatever you want, as long as it's not anything crazy. Somewhere in the video clip, say something like, don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe, or at least tell the people to subscribe. Post it to YouTube with the title Tytaniumfitness Outro, just like you see over here. Try not to change the title because that's the easiest way for me to find it. And then every video, if there's enough of them, I will choose a new one every video to be featured as outro. Alright, so in this video, we're going to talk about belts. If you saw my other video about when I first got this belt, you know this is a Crain belt with a Titan Toro lever. The reason I went with the Toro lever is because my last lever on my last belt, it shattered during a deadlift workout, and from what I've seen with the Inzers and the stock lever that comes with the Crains, the levers just aren't that well made. But I mean, if you look at this one, there's, well, you might not be able to see, but there's like no seams. The edges are all like well finished and everything, so it's a good quality lever, and Titan guarantees it for life, so if it ever breaks, you can send it back and they'll send you a new one. And then also, if you look at the back of my belt, recently I did this. A lot of people have been asking me how I did that. It's just Sharpie. The way I did it is I just went on Microsoft Word and found a font that I like, and I printed out the letters on just like a regular piece of printer paper, and then I cut out the letters to make sort of a stencil. And then when I was trying to figure out how to get the stencil to stick on here without being so stuck that it would leave the paper there, I decided to use chapstick. I would have used Vaseline, but I didn't have any, so I used chapstick and it worked just fine. I mean, it was just sticky enough that the letters stayed down how they should, and then I was able to go with Sharpie. And it came out pretty good. It's not perfect, but it looks okay. If you're considering getting a belt, you have three options that I would recommend. Obviously, your Crain belt, which I will put in a link down below. You have Inzer, which I'll also put a link for, and Titan. And I mean, Crain and Inzer are almost exactly identical. The only difference is that if you get your belt through Crain, you actually send them your waist size in inches and they cut it to that size. Whereas for Inzer, you have to choose between small, medium, large, and XL. Both companies, you can get pretty much any color suede on top that you want. And then your last option would be Titan. And I think if you're going to go with a Titan belt, I would recommend getting a Brahma. I think that's what it's called. It's their most expensive, or one of their more expensive belts. They have all the options as well, lever and prong, as well as the cool thing about Titan is they have different materials that they use for that top layer of leather. So rather than just suede, you do have the option for suede. They also do two-tone suede, also like 3 different colors of suede if you want. They do embroidering, and they also have like different finished leathers, like you can get either finished leather, embossed leather, all kinds of crazy stuff. So if that's what you're looking for, or if you want something really different, you can go with a Titan. The only thing with Titan is that it costs a little bit more, but then again, you have to consider that you are getting that Toro lever that will probably last you forever. A lot of people ask which is better between the prong and the lever belts, and there's really no better or worse. It just comes down to preference. I chose a lever just because I remember when I first started lifting, I had a prong belt, and having a prong belt is cool until you finish your set and you need to get it off, because you have to like go walk up to the rack and then like sort of pin it against the rack and turn your body to get it off. Whereas with the lever, you can just flip it open and you're set. Another consideration that I wish I had thought about before I bought this belt is that with a lever, when you ratchet it down, you do have a considerable amount of overlap. I mean, for me, it's probably more than most people because I lost quite a bit of size around my waist while I was dieting down. So I mean, you can see that's probably like a good, I don't know, 6-7 inches of overlap right there. The only reason that's a problem is because this right here, right over here, I can feel that when I'm lean enough, I can feel that like jabbing into my hip bone or my ribs, and it's extremely uncomfortable, but other than that, it's not a big deal. And on the other hand, if you had a prong belt, it would be more of a pain in the ass to get on and off, but you wouldn't have to deal with that sort of overlap because the prong, obviously, the overlap would be on the outside, so you wouldn't feel it. The one thing I will say is that if you are going to go with a prong belt, There's no reason really to get a double prong belt, other than if you think the single prong isn't going to hold up, but I can't imagine that it would break. So for the sake of simplicity and reliability, I would recommend going with the single prong. Another question that I get a lot about wearing belts is people want to know when you should belt up, or like what weight you should belt up. And a lot of people have recommendations in terms of percentages of your max. For me, I don't really recommend to do it that way. What I generally do for myself is if I am working up to my first working set, let's say on deadlifts is going to be 415, I will just belt up on that first working set. The reason I do that is because usually my first working set, if I'm working up towards the top set, my first working set will only be like a RPE, I don't know, 7. So if it's an easier set like that, then I can use that set to belt up and sort of get used to the feeling of my belt and used to the feeling of pushing out against my belt. But you also have to consider that a lot of people do beltless work for the sake of building up core strength, which is also important. So it really comes down to your own programming and your own training protocol, and you kind of have to make the decision for yourself. The only thing I will say is that I wouldn't recommend wearing a belt all the time for every set, and I also wouldn't recommend never wearing a belt if you plan on competing in powerlifting, just because wearing a belt and using it efficiently or effectively is sort of a skill that you have to learn and then you have to practice. And at the top level of powerlifting, if you ever want to get there, every little bit of advantage that you can get will make a pretty big difference. So learn how to use your belt, practice using it if you want to be good at it. The last thing I wanted to talk about was kind of how to belt up, and I know a lot of this, again, is personal preference, but so a lot of people, when they first start wearing a belt, you'll see them belt up sort of over here, like sort of over their belly button, which is fine. The only reason I don't always recommend that is because the whole point of wearing a belt is to maximize the amount of surface area you have to push your stomach out against. And generally, when you push your stomach out, most people, when they push your stomach out, they can push out more over here than they can over here. So it makes more sense to belt up higher if you can push out more higher up in your stomach. So for me, generally I like to belt up fairly high, somewhere in the middle of my abs, I guess. So it goes about right here. And that allows me to push out as much as I possibly can. That's about it for this video, guys. Don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
What?
Say don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe.
Top Jeff.
Subscribe!